Welcome to the Jungle Brothers podcast. I'm your host, Joey, and today I'm joined by Marko Papuckowski to talk about the 5 keys to excellent health. Now, there's no secrets in this one. You would have heard some of these things before. However, these are still the areas where most of us tend to drop the ball, and I say that with myself included. So, please listen in. I really like the way Marko talks about this stuff. He makes it very simple and very enticing. And if you have a notepad, you will go away from this chat with a lot of handy takeaways. Before we jump into the chat today, I want to remind you that at the end of this month, we have our last Coaches Intensive for this year. This is the course that you want to enroll in if you are an aspiring coach, existing coach, or small gym owner. In the course, over 2 days, we cover all of the foundational skill sets required to be a world-class coach and build a successful PT business. Sales, marketing, relationship building, community, leadership, all of the essential things you need to know to set yourself apart from the pack. This course is also the level 1 certification to join the Jungle Alliance. So if you want to be aligned with us and work in any of our gyms, this is how you would do it. To enroll, simply go to junglealliance.com/courses and sign up for the October Coaches Intensive. As a listener of the podcast, you get a 15% discount when you use the code JBPodcast. I will put a link to the enrollment form and also reinforce that discount code in the show notes. I'd love to see you there. Let's get into today's chat. I'm going to do the intro after.
Okay, so we're talking about my parents and doing a podcast with our parents, and my dad has a really interesting story, and being an Eastern European dad, him and I didn't really get along. I mean, we got along, but arguments and, But now that I'm
what's with that? Is it a volatile, masculine, like?
His way of encouraging was to tell you you're not doing good enough.
Right.
Which now, like my mum would say, why did you do that? He'd be like, well, look at him now,
I made that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a classic, like, Eastern Euro dad thing.
Yeah. But as I've gotten older, I really learned to appreciate them more. Like, they immigrated here with me when I was 9 years old. Dad was 34, 33. Mum was 30. And Dad back in Macedonia used to work as like a bodyguard for the head prosecutor of the country.
Wow.
So he used to carry guns and drive nice cars and wear suits to work every day. And then we came here and his status went from top dog to literally, I found a photo the other day of him in Burger King uniform.
Wow.
And it made me realize, because I'm 30 next year, and I was like, imagine if I moved to another country and went from what I am now, which I'd consider myself like I'm happy with my status, to working at Burger King. And so that sacrifice, now I'm like, Dad will call me, hey, can you do this for me? I'm like, yep, no worries. Like, it's all, whatever you need, I'll help you out. But yeah, doing a podcast with your parents would be, I think, very fruitful.
I got the idea from Scott Pape, who's the author of he's the Barefoot Investor.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yep.
And have you ever read that book?
I haven't read it, no.
Cool book.
Yeah.
If you need help with your finances, which I did. But he says, he gives a couple of just interesting little, really good bits of advice in it beyond the financial thing. And one of them is, hey, your parents aren't going to be around for very long. What you should do is sit down and, I can't remember how he says, but you should sit down, put a camera on and just ask them stuff, like get their life story, because one day they won't be here and you'll just wish you could have had a chance to ask them certain things that kids generally don't ask their parents.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I've thought about it ever since. I'm like, I got to get my olds on the podcast. Ask them shit about how they got together and,
yeah, right. Like, you forget your parents had a life before you came along.
Yeah.
Right? They dated, they did the whole, girlfriend, boyfriend and the marriage. Like, they were excited before you came along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were people too.
Yeah, it's cool.
Man, when you have a kid, once you, I'm guessing you don't have one.
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Macedonian, of course you're going to have them.
We want three actually, but yeah.
Okay, right
That's
on.
the goal. We'll see.
But yeah, it's amazing how that stuff just comes into your mind. Once you have one that you're like, oh my God, like my parents, like it reveals all this shit that you were too busy to think about.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
I have one.
Yeah.
My partner has one from a previous relationship. So I have two,
Yep. Okay.
but half the time we have one.
Okay.
So it's an interesting dynamic because two's great. Like two is for me. I'm like two kids is all I would want.
Yeah. Okay.
But then when we've only got one, like when she goes to stay at her dad's place, I'm like, I feel like there's something missing.
Yeah.
And there is also that personal thing of like, I've actually only brought one child into this world. But the reality of it is I don't want 3 kids. So yeah, it's something that I think about, like not grapple with, but I go back and forth on it.
Yeah.
You know,
Why do you think you don't want 3 kids?
There's just a part of me that I'm just like, there's an inefficiency.
Okay.
There's an efficiency with 2.
Yeah.
You know, you take divide and conquer. You take that one. I take this one.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
There's a nice balance to it. And I say beautiful. It's not like it's what you make of it, right? I don't know if fucking Paul, who's often the other host on this podcast, comes from a family of 8. You know, they did just fine.
Wow.
You know, Fijian. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
But yeah, so as however I interpret it and how I look at it, I'm like, 2's really good for me.
Yeah.
You know, I really like that balance. But then, so when we've only got one and it's like, it feels like there's something that's, you know, out of balance there.
Yeah. Interesting.
Why 3 for you?
I feel I want to have as many children as possible, to be honest. I feel 3 is enough to maximize that kind of want to have as many children as possible, and then but not over the top where, I mean, there's another person to consider. Like you've got to consider your wife at the time. Like, does she want that many kids? Can she get through pregnancy physically, mentally? Can she be healthy? What's her future going to look like with 3 kids? Like, there's a lot to consider. It's not just like what I want.
Yeah.
But, you know, now it's hard. People think like, I don't want to have kids until I'm financially ready, or I don't want to have kids until I'm whatever the reason is. But if you actually look, there's a really good economist that I love to listen to, an old school guy. His name's Thomas Sowell, and he's very just balanced. And like, he's very interesting interviews and books and stuff like that. And he says like, if you live in a Western country like Australia and you have, you know, mics and cars and you drove to do a podcast and you're drinking coffee and all that, you're the 1% of the world. Like, you have air conditioning and you have refrigeration and you have washing machines and you have all the luxuries of the modern world. So compared to the rest of the world, not just our little bubble here in Australia, but compared to the rest of the world, you're very well off financially. And so the idea that I can't have kids until I'm financially more prepared, I feel is not true. I think it's like you can actually do it on a lot less than you think, and your parents probably did it on a heck of a lot less than you think. My parents had me when my mum was 21, my dad was 25. They had no money.
Yep.
You know, my granddad had to buy them a washing machine. Right? So it just depends on how you want to live your life. Like, everything's a trade-off. Like, can you have 3-4 kids and do it on a combined income of 150,000, you and your wife? Probably. But you will have to sacrifice buying the new car and the new iPhone and going on holiday, and you might have to, you know, it's just a different life. So everything's a trade-off. That's a Thomas Sowell quote. Like, everything in life is a trade-off. You can't have it all. You always trade one thing for another.
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
I had a mate who I used to train with down at the calisthenics gym at Bondi Beach.
Yep.
And he was an investment guy. He was actually a restaurateur when we were hanging out, but he had an investment background. And he's from France, but he'd worked in New York for many years. He was a hedge fund manager. And he was very successful with that from like through his early 20s until like his late 20s.
Yep.
And, you know, he was trying to describe it to me one time over dinner, and he's like, yeah, they made the stupid dollars. Like, they just, you know. And he said the way it worked was we had a manager for all of us, and the manager's job was to make sure that we were spending as much money as possible. So almost every night of the week there was a dinner that we had to go to. and the dinner was always at the flashiest restaurant in New York. And it was like, you're buying this week, this, you know, so-and-so's buying tomorrow, whatever. And, you know, we'd buy like the most expensive bottles of champagne at those dinners. And it was just, he said, what the manager did was make sure that you were emptying everything that you were earning.
Best way to motivate someone, yeah.
Yeah.
Scarcity.
And he said, when I quit, I quit, and all of my coworkers said, you're crazy. Look at the money we're on. And he goes, but I could see it. I knew what was happening, and I was like, no, I'm going to take what I've made, and I'm going to go to Australia, and I'm going to fucking create a life and whatever. Do you think that point that you made about, you know, you have enough money now, but we all feel like we don't have enough money, right?
Yeah.
Like all of us feel like it'd be great to just have an extra bit.
Yeah.
Do you think that's because somehow the lifestyle that we have is almost like we have that manager where we just spend what we spend our excess to the point where you're like, well, I don't make enough. It's like, no, you just blow too much.
Absolutely. Like, dude, I'm wearing Lululemon pants. I don't need to. They're great. They're comfy.
I'm wearing Lulus as well.
They fit my
but I've had these
legs.
for 10 years, bro. How long? Yeah.
Like 6 months. But I mean, you know, yeah, we do spend more than we need to. It's a hard, finances is hard, right? Because I think there's like so I think the most impactful amount of money that you can make per month, like this thing per month, if you can have a take home of over 10 grand a month, between 10 to 20, that's when you're like, okay, I'm comfortable. Like I can pay my mortgage, I can pay my car, I have some money left, I can save some. That's like a really impactful amount. To go from 5 to 10 is huge, right? In terms of impact for your comfort, like take home money per month. 10 to 20 is also really huge. Beyond 20, it's like, now it's just excess luxury of what, I can buy this car, I can buy another car, they're both just as good. But I'm going to buy this one just because I have the extra money. I think there's like a point where it becomes less impactful to your actual quality of your life. And so then you've got to consider like, what am I trading to make that additional 10, 20 grand a month?
Yeah.
Like I've got a really good mentor and I was talking to him about business and I said, I really wanted to hit these numbers and do X, Y, Z. And he just sent me a great question. He just said, what will that do for you? Like sit down and think about why and what are you willing to trade? Do you want to work Saturdays? Do you want to work nights? Do you want to have less time with your partner? Do you want to, something's got to give.
Yeah. It's a great way to put it, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's fine to do it. And I have these conversations and I say, hey, we can, like when we're making plans about the future, about even with my team, the team that works for us, the practitioners, I say, hey, we can make you all more money because you want to save for, like one of my head practitioners, her kid trains jiu-jitsu and I love the fact that she can make an income from us and we can pay for his jiu-jitsu classes. Like that's awesome, right? But I say, we can get you guys, I talk about their family goals. I say, do you guys want to buy a house? Do you want to move from where you are to somewhere else? And how can we help you do that? And then I make a deal with them and I say, well, we can do that for you in the next 6 months. We can really push it. But you've got to trade that day for more work and you might not have the time to spend with your kids, but you'll only do it for 6 months. So I think having a time frame where you're like, for the next 12 months, I'm comfortable working weekends so that I can get to X goal. And then after that, I'm pulling it back. But what happens is we do it and then we make the extra income and then we never want to go back.
Yeah.
Because now you've normalized that extra money and you're like, what? Going back almost seems like losing, failing, but it's not. It's just, you're trading for that period of time and then you can pull it back and on season, off season, right?
That's a real, short term.
Yeah.
It's a great way to look at it because absolutely, man. Once you go forward, it's very hard to go back. Yep. You've already got the fucking wine subscription. You've ordered the new Land Cruiser. I don't know.
Yeah.
These are all dreams of mine.
Yeah. Land Cruisers. I like Land Cruisers.
I mean, who doesn't?
Expensive.
But yeah, it's such an interesting battle because we're wired for scarcity. We're wired for survival in an environment that doesn't give much to us. So you got to fight for everything. So now that everything is more or less in abundance, we're still fighting for it, you know, and you're fighting for food. That's why you want to shove stuff in your face all the time. You know, you're fighting for more money. It's like potentially you're making enough, but you want more because you want to buy more stuff because scarcity. There's no, it's, you know. I think it's also very important in these discussions to kind of identify that, like you said, we're in the 1%. If you're here in Sydney, in Australia, even many parts of it, you sit in a very privileged position because you've never had to face the realities of not actually making enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the vast majority of people.
Yeah, there are people out there who are like struggling, but for most of us here, when we zoom out and have a look at our overall life and be like, I have everything I could possibly need to survive. Like when we moved to Australia, my dad said to me, he goes, to be homeless in this country takes effort. Like you know, for you to go without food, really struggling, you really have to like mess up, because there's that much support in terms of like social welfare and help and people help, like programs, and there is a lot out there.
Yeah.
Macedonia, there's none of that.
Right.
Other countries, like when I grew up, we didn't have air conditioning. Like we didn't have, our kitchen was tiny. It was very, very small house. So even those simple luxuries, like we've got the heating on, and yeah, we're very fortunate. You know, God forbid you get sick in a country like Macedonia, where the nearest hospital with chemotherapy is a 2-hour drive away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Still?
Oh,
wow.
Yeah. So we're pretty lucky.
Why did your dad move to Australia?
For those reasons.
Like it was just, he's like, there's a better life there, even though he had the good gig and the status.
He had the good gig and the status, but at the time there was a bit of conflict. It was 2001 and there was conflict going on with Albania. So we've always kind of had, the Balkans is a conflict area. And I think he just went, this is not a place where I want to raise kids. And, you know, I have friends there and people who train jiu-jitsu now, that we've got jiu-jitsu gyms there. And
is that thanks to Rob?
Yeah. Like, shout out to Rob Nomuski opening up. I think we've got like 4 or 5 jiu-jitsu gyms there now. Yeah.
Wow. All under his banner?
All under his banner, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know when I first met Rob?
When?
It was in a jiu-jitsu class. I was a white belt.
Yeah.
No gi. A lot of shirts off.
Yep.
And there was this fucking jacked Adonis of a man. And he was wearing the little tight fight shorts, the little Vale Tudo shorts. Yeah. And the drill was, you know, like king of the mat. So everyone line up, 2 people in the middle, and you start on their back, and then they have to fight out of back control.
Yeah.
And it was like I was up, and I had to go attach myself to his back. And I'm just like putting my arms around this dude. I'm like, this guy's a fucking man. Yeah. I was a boy, you know, and he just, you know, it was gone, you know. But I just remember being like, fuck, that dude's an animal. So funny, right? And then, well, I got to know him a little bit over the years. We never actually really trained together, and he was always, you know, he was the elite guy and I was the beginner. But classic dude, great energy.
Yeah, he's great. Rob and I laugh, like we make a joke because his nickname is Laptop, because many people don't know, but Rob's actually an actuary. He's very, very smart with math.
What is an actuary?
It's, the way I understand it, it's like the highest level of financial math. Like they're the guys who do risk management, all that, predicts the future of share prices in companies and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Very hard. And I remember one time we were sitting at a restaurant and he was like, man, if people knew how nerdy I am, he goes, it would ruin my reputation for jiu-jitsu. Because I can't let it out. So yeah, but anyway, so yeah, I think Dad, and just when, you know, it's going to be a better, like there are people there who are so much smarter and more capable and more educated than I am. They just don't have the opportunities to work. There's no jobs. There's no, you know, it's hard.
What was the, and this is purely just for me to gain some kind of geographical understanding or historical understanding, was there a religious war, like conflict between Macedonia and Albania?
No, just land.
Right.
There's a lot of ethnic Albanians that live in Macedonia, and most of them illegally across the border. and they don't really assimilate with the rest of the communities. Like they stick to themselves. The way when you drive through a town that's mostly ethnic Albanian, you can tell because the walls and the fences are super high.
Wow.
Which is already like, we don't want you to
Separate.
see us, right? It's very different. It's a different culture. So there's a lot of that going on everywhere in the Balkans. You got Kosovo, you had the like conflict there, and Serbia and Bosnia and the Balkan Wars, and so it's a very high conflict region. A lot of corruption.
Yeah, okay.
Politicians aren't exactly in it for the good of the people. They get rich and leave, and next party takes over. So yeah, it's not exactly not a great place to build a life.
Again, speaks to the kind of the privilege of a place like this, whereby Labor, Liberal, you got your preference. Does it really matter? Not that much. Like it's, oh fuck, the Libs got in. Damn it, I vote Labor. Oh well. Whereas like, I'm sure in countries like that, potentially, there's like critical shit that's going to happen depending on who's holding power.
Oh mate, neighbors don't talk to each other because they vote for a different party. It's brothers don't talk to each other because they vote for a different party.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very like politics is a very big thing there, and you can understand it because it's a former Yugoslav, former communist, socialist kind of country where that is a serious thing.
Yeah.
Like it's it's those generations are still alive.
Is that essentially left versus right? Is that kind of what those divides are?
Pretty much.
Socialist versus conservative?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'd love to go there, man. I mean, not necessarily like
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
It's
I hear amazing things about Macedonia.
Come for a seminar. We do seminars every year. Like June, July is always, and people from the Balkans all come. There's like a beautiful city called Ohrid. It's on the water. It's like a beautiful lake. It's got historic churches. It's beautiful.
So you go there with Rob and you guys run seminars?
I went 2 years in a row, 2018 and 2019. We did the seminars.
Yeah.
I haven't been back since because COVID and everything happened, but I'll probably go back next year.
Fucking cool. Yeah. Yeah, I'll consider that. I'd love to.
It's epic.
That'd be mad.
It's beautiful.
Mate, take me to your business.
Okay.
Tell me what you do. I know you through Marko's Daily Dose.
Yep. Yep.
The show that you run on Instagram.
The show, the eclectic mix of
I kind of like it.
Everything.
The name Marko's Daily Dose, I feel like it alludes to like, oh, what are we getting today? Like it's like an episode.
Yeah.
And you do so. I really like the pieces where you just talk and you'll often share like a conversation, like a live conversation that you've had with one of your clients.
Yeah.
Or some kind of reflection on that, right?
Yeah. Like short clips of longer form content. Yeah.
But this is actually the first time we've hung out in person.
Yeah. We never rolled.
Never rolled.
Never met.
Both black belts.
Yeah.
Never met. I've known of you for a while. I think the first person I met who mentioned you was Hewan Fate.
Okay, yeah.
Do you know Hewan?
Yeah, I do.
He's an older fella, and he mentioned you as like, gut health.
Okay.
Marko.
It's good. It's working.
Yeah, and I was like, Marko who? And he's like, yeah, he's like a high level jiu-jitsu guy. You should know him. And I was like, no, I never heard of the dude. And then, I don't know, some years later, somehow I saw it and I was like, oh, okay, that's the dude that Hewan was talking about. But yeah, tell me what you do. For me, it's like, gut health, but
yeah,
expand on it.
I'll tell you the story of how it started because it has to do with jiu-jitsu. So when I was younger, I was probably like 23, 24, and this is when, in my mind, I was definitely going to be a UFC. I was going to be in the UFC. That was like the only thing that I wanted to do. I had finished uni. I did my nutrition degree at Wollongong. I was working at GNC. That was like a part-time thing at the time, and I just wanted to fight. And I was fighting at under 70, which for me is a big weight cut. I'm 84 kilos this morning. So big weight cut. And training all the time, fighting all the time, and I started to get staph infections. That was like the first thing that went wrong. So I got one and took the antibiotics, and then I was fine. And then 3 months later, I got another one. And 3 months later again, I got another one. And after like the third or fourth course of antibiotics in the 12 months, my gut started to play up. I noticed like my bowel movements were loose and I would go to the bathroom more than I usually would, and it was just not good. Bloating and irritability. I always had psoriasis, and I thought that was just a thing that I just had genetically. My sinuses were always blocked. That was another thing. I always used to have sinusitis. Like I used to live on Sudafed.
Wow.
Right.
Just to kill the inflammation in the sinus.
Just to breathe.
Yeah, right.
What else did I have? So that was the 4 main things. It was the staph, gut, sinuses, and psoriasis. Those were like the main things. And I was like, there's something wrong, man. Like why am I 24, 25 and feeling all these things? So I'd go to the GP and I'd ask them and they'd tell me you're fine. Right? Your blood work looks great. You're fine. Okay. Which is like the story you hear often with our patients. But then I started seeing, I used to work for a company called Spectrum Pharmaceuticals. Shout out to them. They make probably the best probiotics in the world. They're based here in North Sydney. And when I started working for them, I discovered the whole integrative medicine and integrative health world. So we'd go to conferences like ACNM, and I would sit in and learn about these doctors that were using lifestyle and nutrition and microbiome and genetics to treat people. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So there was a speaker on the stage, there was a doctor who mentioned jiu-jitsu, and I was like, oh my God, another jiu-jitsu guy. You know, when you're, and I ended up seeing him, and he treated me he pretty much over the 2-year span, changed my diet, put me on supplements. We did a whole bunch of testing. Not to say that my health is perfect. There's always something to work on, but I don't have psoriasis anymore, like zero. My sinus is completely fine. I haven't had staph infection in like 4 years.
Movements are solid?
Great. Yeah. Gut's fine.
Wow.
All through just nutrition. We're going to get into it, like a lot of lifestyle factors, but mainly like what I don't eat.
Right.
Which is where people ask me, what do I eat? I said, no, it's what you don't eat.
It's an easier way to frame it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's where the business came about. I was like, oh, I can do this for other people. And that's basically it.
So then what was your integrative medicine? Was that your field of study then?
So I did a Bachelor of Science in Nutrition, and then my postgraduate training was pretty much mentorship with the doctor that I worked with, and ACNM conferences, which is how you learn about every quarter they do a new topic, whether it's Alzheimer's or gut health or COVID is a big one at the moment. So that's where I kind of did my postgraduate training. And since then, it's just been self-taught and subscribed to a lot of newsletters that I pay for and research articles and that type of stuff.
Right on.
So, yeah.
Would you say that that style of, what do you call it? Do you call it a...
Integrative, I would say, like, or functional health, or...
Okay, yep. Is it a mainstream thing yet, or is it still kind of like what am I really trying to articulate when I say that? If you're in the presence of another medical professional, someone that's studied whatever, however many fucking years to get their degree, do they respect that in the same, or is it still like okay, cool, yeah?
It's rare.
That sounds like great stuff.
It's very rare. Yeah. It's getting more and more popular, but you still have, and I just don't understand this. I don't understand. You still have the GPs and the doctors and even the specialists who are like, diet and exercise won't make a difference, or like, how do you even? Or there's not enough evidence for that. Like, really? Are we still? If a patient has colitis, generally the doctor or the gastroenterologist will tell them diet won't make a difference. What are you talking about? Like, it's literally it's an inflammatory bowel disorder. So what you eat directly impacts.
Because it's like going there.
Yeah. How can it not?
Yeah.
But there's still that belief in mainstream medicine. So it's not as, it's getting bigger. Like, it's definitely getting bigger, and there are a lot more people that are aware of it, but it's still quite niche, I would say.
It's interesting, isn't it? I kind of see it as the specialist versus generalist sort of debate in a way, and it's largely how we sort of frame our training here at the gym, and you know everything that we do, say with the Alliance, is like generalization is always better, because a specialist will make sacrifices in order to reach high levels of specialization within a given field.
Yeah.
So you want to be a powerlifter, great, but you say goodbye to flexibility and movement capacity, right? I had my physio, Nick Batcher, on the show recently, and we were talking about the same thing with physios, and I was saying what I really like about him is that he just has a well-rounded view of things. He understands jiu-jitsu, even though he doesn't train it, but he kind of sees the whole picture when you're coming in and you're getting a treatment from him. It's that idea of like having a wide perspective, and arguably what we know as conventional Western medicine is extremely specialized in all fields. In terms of like, if I have an issue, say with my sinus, I go to an ENT, ear, nose and throat guy. He doesn't know anything about the gut. He doesn't know anything about
nutrition.
Yeah. He's not even really into, say, breath work. He's into, I do surgeries in noses and shit, you know, and so, you know, so it's like, and like you can, like, obviously there's a huge benefit in our society to having that level of specialization. It's allowed us to learn incredible things about so many facets of the human body and whatnot, but it's kind of closed us off to, it's kind of narrowed our view. And I don't know, like, I don't know how I see it, if it's like the pendulum has swung too far or whatever it is, but that's kind of how I view what you're talking about. It's like being able to see the whole picture and going, okay, well, actually all of these systems are interconnected, and let's look at how one might be influencing another.
Yeah. Well, I explain it to patients as, if you're an athlete, a professional athlete, you would have a care team. You would have a physiotherapist, a chef, a doctor, a surgeon, a psychologist. You would have all those things. And so why don't you do that for yourself now? Because you demand quite a lot. Like, if you've got to raise kids and run a gym and run a business, and then you want to train, you're essentially a professional athlete, but in life. And yet you don't have a care team. So having somebody who can zoom out and look at the overall picture is like having a head coach, right? Like you want someone that can put the pieces together and say, when did the issue start? How have you tried to fix it since? What happened in that time of your life? Did you move countries? Did you change jobs? Did you have a child? Did you go through a divorce? Was there something stressful? Did you change your eating? It's not all just physical. A lot of it is circumstantial. And when you go to a doctor's office, no one asks you they don't ask you those questions.
No.
You know, so you've got to put the pieces together. You're a very complex human being. Like, it's not a simple, I have acid reflux, here's an Nexium. It's not like that.
So on that, is it, when you boil it down and when you look at it, is the solution often, because the complex issues, right? Human body's a complex thing, but is the solution often quite simple, or are the solutions also complex?
The principles apply to everyone, but then there are certain things that make a big difference. Like, if certain supplements or certain forms of a supplement that might be different for one person to the other, we can improve everyone's health. I could tell you in 5 ways how everyone could feel better. You know, it's like eat.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, like okay, let's talk about the most general things that we see in people who in everyone, but let's just stick to people who train. Protein deficiency is a big one. Most people undereat, right? Especially females. They get what we call hypothalamic amenorrhea. Like, their hypothalamus turns off their ability to reproduce, and so they lose their period. They don't eat enough. They have more anxiety. Their thyroid struggles to keep up. So most female patients undereat, especially protein, because protein is vilified, right?
Yep. Why is protein vilified? Like, because like in part of the plant-based movement?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly the plant-based
or
movement.
Maybe it's just part of too, like staying slim, eating things that are just not, you're just not eating enough food. It's not nourishing enough.
Yeah, you're just not eating enough food. But yeah, protein, there's a whole, we'll get into that. So that's one of them, right? Under eating, under sleeping. Almost nobody sleeps enough, right?
Speak to that.
So when I wear an Oura ring And I remember when I first got it, I was like, yeah, I get 8 hours of sleep. No, I'm in bed for 8 hours. But if your sleep efficiency is like 88%, you're getting 6.5.
Yeah.
Which is nowhere near enough. So most people need to sleep more, eat more, move more, even athletes. I remember when I was like preparing for fights, I would train in the morning, train at night, but in between I didn't do much movement. So really I have a sedentary lifestyle with intermittent training that's intense.
Right.
But I'm not really getting many steps in. I'm not walking much. I'm not stretching. So most people are very sedentary.
Yep.
And when they think of getting healthy and losing weight, the first thing they think of is which gym do I join, or what class do I do, or how much exercise. But there's a lot you can do before you get to that stage. Like, for example, walk 5,000 steps. Go for a 15-minute walk after each meal so you can balance out your blood sugar levels, right? So most people don't eat enough. Most people don't sleep enough. Most people don't move enough, which those are like the common ones that we know. I guess another one that's a bit more complex is relationships. Like, most people are stressed. Right? Their work relationships aren't great. Their intimate relationships aren't great. Their friendships aren't great. And so most of us don't actually have enough human contact, especially after COVID. And then stress. Like, the fifth one is chronic stress. And especially in the last few years, it's almost like humans have a thing. Like, when you walk into a jiu-jitsu gym and you put your gi on, you take your work clothes off and you put your gi on and you put your belt on, you change frames. You're now leaving one thing to enter another thing, right? And you do the same thing when you go to the office. You leave your home, you put your work clothes on, you go to work, and then you leave work and you come home and you get changed and you enter another frame. With what's happened over the last few years, where people are working from home, we've lost a lot of that. Everything's dissolved into one.
Yeah.
So you wake up, you have a cup of coffee, you get to the office, you're still in your pajamas, you do your Zoom call, right? And then you might go to the gym, you might not. It's just like people are we've lost rituals, I'd say. So there's a lot of chronic stress.
Which kind of, does that go about sort of those boundaries or those parameters that we would like, that's my work time, this is like, they're kind of gone.
Kind of gone, yeah. So everything bleeds into another thing. So your work stress bleeds into your relationship, and then your relationship stress bleeds into your training, and it kind of just all becomes convoluted. And you're like, I don't know why I'm stressed, but I'm really fucking stressed.
Yeah.
Right. Like Chloe and I, who's my head practitioner, we were laughing yesterday about one of the patients who's a really driven guy, and he's been getting arrhythmia, like his heart rate's like, he's waking up because his heart rate's so high. And we were saying like, hey, if you're not getting arrhythmia, like, how much do you really want it? Right. Like, it's everyone, a lot of people are feeling that way, a lot. So I'd say those are the 5 big things.
So two sort of things I want to drill into on that. With the relationships piece, talk to me about how important relationships are on health generally, physical and mental, because I think it's very easy I think for a lot of people, we go, yeah, relationships are great. And, it's, yeah, man, you got to be around good people and community and stuff. But at the end of the day, we don't really value human connection anywhere near as much as I would argue most people wouldn't value that as much as they would value, say, nutrition or sleep when it comes to being healthy.
Yeah.
You tend to think of it as just like, it's a nice thing to have.
Yeah. Well, let's go the most important relationship, which is your intimate one, right? Because that's the person you're going to theoretically spend your life with. And a lot of psychologists say that, even in longitudinal studies, like long-term studies, they say that particular relationship will be the biggest determinant of your quality of life and health. Not how much money you have, not even your health, like physically. Even if you're an unwell person, if you have a good, solid, intimate relationship, you'll be much happier overall. So I think that's a huge one. I had a thought, I had something in mind, but it kind of left my...
That's a real fascinating one. I say that as someone who I abruptly ended a relationship that I was in
Yeah.
to be in the one that I'm now in,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
It's an incredible relationship, and I feel so fortunate that
Yeah.
I'm in it. But I ponder it often, and I think, man, if I hadn't have met my partner now,
Yeah.
that never would have happened, and I probably would have stayed where I was
Yeah.
because it was okay. It was good enough. I was in it. I had invested, 7 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Got a what are the costs by? I've already invested time. So
Some cost fallacy. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Like, let's just keep it going. And I see that in other relationships, and I wish that I could say to people, well, we should do what I did, but the reality is it was luck that I came across that person when I did. And
yeah, absolutely. And there's a saying in French. I don't know how to say it in French, but he essentially says, like, if you see a man and he looks like he should have the world at his fingertips, he's got everything. He's successful, he's smart, he's physically capable, blah, blah, and you see him hanging his head, find the woman.
right.
Because you can have nothing going for you, and you can have the right woman in your life, and it'll motivate you, and it'll make you happy, and you'll be able to get through anything. And it can be vice versa. You can have everything. You can have the wrong relationship, and it'll completely destroy you. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
So like that, how you're saying, you feel, I guess, blessed, fortunate, lucky to have what you have. Like, that's huge, because everything could fall apart for you, but you still have that support network, which will actually keep you quite healthy. So.
And when you say healthy in that context, you're talking about the same, like, it'll keep your body healthy, it'll keep your mind healthy. Like, it has a powerful
effect on your physiological health.
Right.
Yeah. There's a really good study, the Gottman Institute. So John Gottman and his wife, they started this like bed and breakfast thing where they'd bring couples in and they'd study them, and they would determine with 90% accuracy which one of those couples were going to get divorced and which wouldn't.
Wow.
Right? And the way they would do it, they would actually measure their heart rate variability, their heart rate during arguments, their blood pressure, everything, right? And on the outside, they look very calm. The heart rates were like 160 beats per minute.
Right.
During a confrontation or an argument or a discussion. So people don't realize, like, your environment or how you interact with people, your relationships, it has a physiological effect. Anxiety is not purely mental. It's very physiological. So is depression, right? You can't have a unhealthy environment and a healthy body. It doesn't work that way.
Right. I mean, that even as a concept is probably counter to a lot of what not counter, but it's not the frame that conventional medicine comes through, is it?
No.
Conventional medicine is like, this is the body and this is,
Yep.
I mean, I fucking love it when someone says to me, hey, have you seen this? And it's an article that's like, study shows that, lifting weights a couple times a week increases mental health. And you're like, yeah, thanks, mum. It's how to read. Yeah, blown away. But it just speaks to that sort of conventional thing where it's like physical and mental are separate in a way.
Yeah, and they're not, because the brain is the master organ. The brain regulates and controls everything. And the brain's only job and its only concern, it's its survival. Just wants to make it to the next day. Doesn't care about the future you, doesn't care about future problems, it cares about now. So if it has to sacrifice if like, for example, let's take depression, right? A lot of people feel depressed and now it's a big problem, and we tend to think of it as purely mental. But let's just say you're running really low on resources. You don't have enough nutrition to run through your day, you're vitamin D deficient, you're B12 deficient, you're iron deficient, you don't have the resilience, right? And your brain is trying to figure out a way of how it can survive efficiently with such low resources. So what does it do? It makes you want to isolate, and it depresses your energy and depresses you from wanting to go and interact and do things, because people are dangerous. And so is the outside environment. So we don't know if we can cope with people and viruses and potential threats to your immune system and maybe getting chased by a tiger or fighting another tribe. So just sit in your cave, isolate, because this is the most efficient way we can survive.
Wow.
What happens if we rebuild those resources and we make you physically better? You have more iron, you have more B12, you have more vitamin D, your immune system's more robust. Will you still feel as depressed? Most people don't feel as, some people still, struggle, because there are some things that are like purely psychological, but for the most part, you can make a heap of improvements by attacking the physical first, because your brain now goes, oh, I've got, scarcity versus abundance. I've got an abundance of resources. Let's go test myself. That's how I think of the connection between mental health and physical health.
Wow, that's a really interesting way to look at the depression piece.
Yeah.
And of course, it's simplifying a thing, but in a way, as a way of thinking about it, you can't help it when you hear something like that. I think about the people that I know who struggle with a bit of depression. I'm like, oh, I've got to get those resources back up.
Yeah.
But yeah. What's the I think the fascinating part of that is that when you realize that there's a benefit to that thing you're dealing with. I remember reading once that, and I could get this wrong, so you can probably correct me if I have, but I remember reading once that type 1 diabetes evolved, was believed to evolve in parts of Northern Europe, where it was extremely cold. And it was as a mechanism to keep their body temperature up, by not breaking down the sugar in their blood through insulin, they could fuel brown fat stores, or it allowed them to deposit more brown fat.
Yeah. And
brown fat kept them warmer, as it does with babies and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was this mechanism that evolved to help them survive. But the problem is that now, once you're in an environment where sugar is available, if you have that mechanism, it fucks you up.
It's out of context.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're all survival genes out of context.
And is that the way? Is that the way that they are all?
Pretty much, yeah.
It's always
conditions. Are basically hyperimmune. Your immune system's trying to defend you, but in the process, it's attacking your own cells. That's autoimmune. So at some point, that was really beneficial when we didn't have antibiotics, when we didn't have. You were able to create so much inflammation that you would heal and survive when other people didn't. The rest of the tribe died. You made it. That's why you're here now, thousands of years later. But it's the same mechanism in a wrong context.
Right.
So that's why lifestyle is so important now, like even more so. Right. So, man, our modern world is not built for health. We have access to too much food that we otherwise would never make. Like, take a croissant, for example. Do you know how difficult it is to make a croissant?
I've been told. A lot of layering and...
Yeah. If you had to cook it yourself, you probably wouldn't have it very often.
No.
Right? But because it's available and someone else is doing the cooking for us on a more industrial basis, like higher... what's the word I'm looking for? Higher scale... You can just buy it for a couple of dollars and eat it every day if you want. Hot chips, if you had to cook them yourself. Oil, big pans, big pots.
Where the fuck do you get the oil from?
It's a huge thing, right? But now you can just buy it. So we've handed over our cooking and processing and preparation of food to industry. Industries, they want profit. That's how they run.
Yeah.
They're really concerned about your health. You should be concerned about your health.
So talk to me about what you see those. So let's say like food's one. What are the other main culprits in our modern world that trip people up with their health?
Food's the biggest one. Alcohol is a huge one. It's just been normalized quite a lot. And chronic stress. Right.
Alcohol, okay, I think, let's say, that makes a lot of sense. Talk to me about chronic stress. let's say pre-COVID. So before, you know, because that was a
Yep.
unique situation. Maybe not moving forward, but prior to that, prior to COVID, what is it that's causing people stress, and how does that manifest?
Well, let's look at the average day of somebody who works corporate, average person. And I see, like, I go to the cafe every morning and I see people catching the train and what they order, and I'm a little bit, perceptive that way. I'm curious to see what people order. So they'll get up, they, will put their clothes on, they'll start walking or driving to their workplace, and on the way they'll get a croissant and coffee. So we've already started with a blood sugar spike and a big dip. They go to work, they sit in front of a screen for 8 to 9 hours, usually more, they're overworked. For lunch, they'll have something quick, their gut's not working very well. They've definitely taken some form of medication, whether it's a Nexium or Ritalin or whatever they're taking, right, to cope and get through their day.
Which is to help with some condition that they've got?
Some condition that they've been diagnosed with.
Yeah.
Right? Then they get home around 7, I'd say. And by that point, they're usually exhausted. And so they don't give the best of themselves to their partner or their children, and everyone's kind of overall unhappy. That adds more stress to the home. They go to bed around 12 because their only downtime is after 9 p.m. So they'll eat ice cream or chips and watch TV and be exposed to blue light and not get a very restful night's sleep. They go to bed. Because they haven't had enough REM sleep and deep sleep, they don't really repair, they don't recuperate, their brain doesn't detox, and so they wake up and they do it all over again. And they keep doing it for 365 days a year, every year, for 10, 15, 20 years, every day. And that's a huge stress. And most people actually normalize it and they go, but I'm not stressed. But when we use a scale when we bring patients on where we measure. We go, there's like 25 life events, and each life event has a different point system as to how much stress overall you're experiencing. And when we go through it, people are shocked. They're like, yep, that happened. I had a death in the family. I've got a mortgage higher than X amount. I've had a change in circumstances. Boom, boom. And we go through it and we tally the points up, and I'm like, you're extremely stressed, objectively. You might think you're coping with it, but that's because you've just normalized it. And that's chronic stress. And most people, unfortunately, live their life that way. And I think they live their life that way because they don't deliberately plan it. And like Jordan Peterson has a really good thing called a self-authoring program where he gets you to plan your daily life, like from the moment of you waking up. What do you want to do? Do you want to drive to work? Do you not want to drive to work? Where do you want to live? How much money do you want to earn? How many kids do you want to have? All these like really hard questions, so that then you're making a conscious decision and a trade-off to say, I don't want the extra 20 grand a month. I want to work from home so I can be with my kids.
Yeah.
Or 20 grand a year, or whatever the case is, right? So I think most people just fall into that unconsciously, and all of a sudden they find themselves 8 years down the line, 40 kilos heavier, very unhealthy, going, well, how the fuck did I end up here?
And the road back is perhaps too long, too arduous for a lot of folks, isn't it?
Well, you've got to give something up. Maybe you give up the high-paying job and go through a medium-paying job because you want to work 4 days a week instead of 5. Who knows? Like, something's got to give. It's either that or your health.
Geez, that's a grim picture you paint with that. And I don't disagree with it at all. I see it playing out as well.
Yeah.
I love observing people,
yeah.
You're like, I'm fortunate in many ways. I've never been in the corporate scene. Mm-hmm. Never had any jobs in that. I've been in other jobs that brought their own whatever unhealthy nuances to it. But that as one in particular where you're like, even the clothing that you have to wear is incredibly restrictive to your body. Like there's so many, you're in an artificial environment under fluorescent lights, which we are right now, but most of the time it's downstairs, outside on the gym floor. It's, it just, there's a lot of stuff in that you can see are not benefiting your physiology.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, unfortunately, that's most people.
When someone comes to you and they're like, hey man, I'm, whatever, working for Price Waterhouse and doing the thing, and I put on the leather shoes every day and catch the train in. Do you hit them with that real talk straight away? Or do you have to be a little bit more, do you drip feed the stuff?
I'm pretty upfront with the hard questions. That's why we have an entire female team to balance out the to balance out that energy with our patients, like good cop, bad cop. But I generally will, one, I'll ask them why. What do you want? When do you want it? Why do you want it? And why is what you're doing now not, like, why is it so bad? Right? So most people are like, I really want to get this fixed. Why? Why not just live with it? Give me your why, and then I'll tell you how. Because if you don't have the why, the how doesn't matter.
It's good. It's a great counter question.
Yeah. So the more I've done clinical work, the more I realize it's like 80% psychological.
Right.
It's easy to give people take this supplement, cut this out, eat this instead, do X, Y, Z. The math part of it, the biochemistry part of it is quite easy. Getting people to make behavioral changes is the really difficult part. For all of us, like we all have things that we're trying to do that we just don't do. Like for me, it's like doing my mobility in rehab, and I'm like, fuck, I do it like once a week, at best. So there's always something that you need to change. And the older we get, the less neuroplasticity we have, the more ingrained our patterns become, the more difficult it is to do. So learning new things and like being challenged as you get older is really important, right? So first I get into the why and the why not. Why not just keep doing what you're doing? Doesn't seem so bad.
And so that really forces someone's hand then to look at, well, what are the outcomes of this? Or what are the skeletons in my closet that I'm actually trying to address here that maybe I don't want to bring to the forefront?
Yeah. It's future pacing. It's going, okay, say you continue on the path you're on and you have early signs of osteoarthritis. What happens in 5 years' time? Do you know what medication you'll be prescribed? No, I don't. Okay, I can tell you. And here are the side effects, and this is how you will have to administer it. This is how you have to dispose of it once you've used it, and this is what it can do for your quality of life. And are you prepared to do that? No, why not? Seems pretty like, why not? And then you go down okay, well, let's do this instead then. Once I get that emotional, like once you paint that picture in someone's mind and they can see it, because all of us think we're invincible. I never thought I'd get injured. I never thought I'd have health issues. You always think it won't happen to me until it does happen to you. And sometimes it takes like a good practitioner to say, this is what's likely going to happen, or it's more probable that this will happen if you keep going down the route you're on. Like if you're eating unhealthy, you're highly stressed, you're not exercising, the probability of you having a chronic condition or dying from something tragic like a heart attack there's a higher likelihood of that than of you not. So I have to tell you, like if that's what I see, I have to tell you.
What about for people who, tell me about some of the most common things that you will be treating or addressing with people who are and I'm thinking about people who train in my gym here.
Yeah.
Decent shape.
Yep.
Probably pretty busy. Exercise regularly. But, also probably don't get quite enough sleep. Diet isn't quite, like the nutrition isn't quite where they want it to be. Above average though. Talk to me about what you see in people like that are the common things that they're not addressing or that they could be improving.
Generally some form of like autoimmune or digestive issue. So generally there's maybe a genetic component to the autoimmune. Mum and dad had a thyroid issue and now they've got a thyroid issue, right? And that's set off by a combination of things. So thyroid's a big one. Even in men, even though it's mostly undiagnosed in men, it just gets ignored. What does
a thyroid issue often result in?
So your thyroid is a master regulator of your metabolism. And so there's there's a few things that can happen. You can have hyperthyroid, hypothyroid, Hashimoto's, Graves' disease, and then eventually potentially thyroid cancers. So if you have an underactive thyroid, you pretty much don't have enough hormones to run your day. And so you tend to gain more weight. You tend to feel more fatigued. Right? Everything just feels, it's like walking through a wind tunnel. It's like, man, everything just feels so hard. Right? If you have an overactive thyroid, it's the opposite problem where you have a difficult time gaining weight. You get bloating and bowel issues because things are moving too quickly, and you sweat and you can't regulate temperature, and your heart rate's higher than normal, and you get kind of arrhythmia every now and again, and sometimes even panic attacks. That's a hyperthyroid, and I see that a lot in athletes.
Okay.
Yeah. I see a lot of thyroid because we push so hard, right? And so your thyroid's like trying to keep up with all your demands.
Yep.
And you keep pushing because, most athletes are quite strong-willed, and so you end up overdoing it sometimes.
And is that something that you cause for yourself? Or, and here's an interesting one, is there a case for people who potentially have hyperthyroid? They have a hyperthyroid, right? Or they deal with a bit of that they naturally find their ways into highly demanding athletic sports because it suits their high output energy.
Yeah, maybe it could be like I think that's more of like a higher, you're hardwired in terms of like dopamine. I heard somebody talk about this the other day. I think it was Andrew Huberman actually talk about dopamine being the achievement molecule, makes you want to achieve things. So generally people who are achievement driven tend to do sports so that they can compete, so they can win.
Yep.
And that same framework or mindset is also the things that can lead you to kind of overdo things and cause health issues. So I don't know. It's probably a combination of both.
Makes sense. I remember a fella an osteo, Cole Clayton, smart guy that I did a workshop of once recently, talking about breath work and nasal breathing and vagal tension or vagal tone and all that kind of stuff. But he was saying that there was a study that showed a lot of people who move into like intense physical output activities, CrossFit, whatever boot camp style activities, maybe certain sports, are people that are actually basically shit at breathing because they have like a deficiency day to day, but when they go play the sport or do the thing, they pump through all this oxygen and it makes them feel good. So it kind of reinforces like that's me.
I understand that. I catch myself not breathing sometimes.
Like actually not at all?
Like just breathing really shallow. I'm like, why am I breathing so shallow? I'd say I'm a pretty poor breather overall.
I'm assuming you haven't read The Oxygen Advantage yet.
No, I haven't.
I was blown away by that book because his point is that our biggest breathing problem is that we breathe too much.
Okay. As in too many breaths?
Too many breaths?
Yeah.
Too much oxygen.
Okay.
And he said, and mouth breathing is bad for a bunch of reasons, but one of the main reasons it's bad is because you're moving a big volume of air. So I pull big breaths in my mouth and out. He said, the ideal breath that we're looking for in a calm, relaxed state should be barely perceptible to someone who's watching you. And he's like, and that's what the nose does. The nose restricts the amount of air you can get in, which increases your carbon dioxide tolerance. And it's having a high tolerance for CO2 that is the hallmark of a good breather. Mouth breathers have low tolerance. That's why they've got to move it in and out all the time.
Yeah, okay.
Which for me flipped it on my head because I've always been a mouth breather. And I always thought that, oh man, I don't get enough oxygen or some shit. So I need to work on my breathing. But it was for the wrong reasons. When I read that, it's like, yeah, because you're a mouth breather, you breathe too much.
Yeah.
So it actually just flipped the thing for me.
Speaking of, that reminds me of another really common thing that we often goes overlooked, which is sleep apnea. Huge problem. It's like a silent epidemic.
How is that?
1 in 2 men suffer from sleep apnea and 1 in 4 women. So a lot of it is metabolic. They're far too inflamed and overweight, and or they're mouth breathers. They breathe through their mouth at night. Huge problem because you wake up feeling groggy. You don't regulate your metabolism as well, your blood sugar. It's a massive problem, sleep apnea. So not only do we not get enough volume of sleep, but the quality of our sleep is also quite poor. So if you have sinus issues, for example, well, then you're breathing through your mouth the entire night.
Yes. I've been a mouth breather forever.
Yeah.
And I had shit sinuses. And I've been taping my mouth shut for the last 3 months every night.
Do you use nasal strips as well?
No.
They help.
They help, right?
They lift pretty much the skin and open up the airways a little bit more.
I'll give them a try. But here's what I've learned is that simply by not allowing myself to breathe through my mouth, my sinuses have improved.
Yeah, wow.
And it's almost like it was just a neglected apparatus.
Yeah,
I'm not using it, so it like goes rusty and shit.
Yeah.
And then now I'm using it. It's like, hey, it actually doesn't work that bad.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
do you feel more refreshed when you wake up using mouth tape?
That one, I would say marginally. It's not been a significant impact, and part of that is I got a 1.5-year-old in the bed with us. So sleep is not as ideal as, it just hasn't been a consistent testing ground.
Yep.
But I would say on the whole, yes, my sleep quality has improved.
Yeah.
And I feel way better. And I mean, even just, anecdotal benefit, I don't wake up with a gross mouth.
Yeah, dry mouth. Absolutely.
Yeah, dry mouth. I'm like, I've got to go brush my teeth straight. I wake up and like my mouth is fresh.
Yeah.
It's been closed all night.
I want to ask you about your eat to win philosophy. What is that?
You're not ready for that.
Give me the secret sauce. What is it?
I love this. I've worked so hard in my life to create brands.
Yeah.
To create Jungle Brothers, the Jungle Alliance, this thing, that we bring to the people. I've worked, underpaid, overworked for years on end to, bulletproof. But still, to this day, the most successful thing the thing that's gotten the biggest traction with the people is Eat to Win.
Oh man, it's good. I like it.
It's fun.
You have a knack for names.
Thanks, man. Eat to Win is it's a term that I coined. It's very tongue in cheek.
Yeah,
and it points to an appreciation of food. That is essentially what it is. It is taking pride in your relationship with food, in how you prepare it, enjoyment. It speaks to gaining nourishment from the food, but it's not exclusive to healthy foods. As an example, I can be on a road trip at McDonald's and that is an Eat to Win moment because I'm fucking here at McDonald's and I'm having a double quarter pounder.
Yeah.
And that's good times. And I know that you feel that. Like I know that everyone, or most people are like, McDonald's, man, like,
yeah,
and so because in that moment, in that context, it's an appreciation of food, right? So I often get asked the question like, well, what is Eat to Win? And so it's really, if I boil it down, it's that relationship with food. I really enjoy cooking and I really enjoy good food, and I enjoy diversity of food. I like trying to play with things from different cuisines. I like going to Marko's grandma's place and having, what the fuck is this? And we had that. I really enjoy those experiences, and I think that for so many people in our realm of like fitness and health and training, food has become very much just a functional thing. It's like, what are my macros? I get my protein from the chicken breast and the rice, and I get the greens from the broccoli, and it's a bit of a pushback against that, because as much as I see that is important, I also really love just that enjoyment of food, particularly like from European culture, right? Where like food is such a centerpiece of get-togethers and socializing and whatnot. So Eat to Win sits somewhere in the middle where it's like, well, let's hit our goals. Let's do let's be the person we want to be through food, but let's also let's keep that thing where food's something special.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people assume that when you work with a nutritionist you're going to have to cut out the things that you enjoy. It's not true, because I love food and I eat a huge variety of food. And I remember you commented on one of my Instagram videos when I cooked like a ribeye and
a beautiful lunch you cooked for yourself.
Food has more value than just a unit. It's not just a unit of measure. And when you actually look at the healthiest people in the world, like the blue zones of the world, they don't count their macros. They don't restrict anything in particular, but they have a intuitive knowledge of what they're eating and how they're preparing it and what's seasonal and what isn't. And that all has to do with cooking and knowledge that's been passed down. And that's what we've lost. Now we're just completely disconnected to some people. Like the first win for one of our patients is when they start to connect the dots of why they feel the way they feel that day. So if someone wakes up with a headache and they go, actually, yesterday I had that to eat or that to drink, and this morning I've got a migraine, that makes sense. And they connect the dots and they start to learn how to manage their own health and what to eat and what not to eat. It's when people have no idea, they'll have like people will have like an iced chocolate and a croissant for breakfast, and like, I don't know why I feel so shit by 3 p.m. Like but when they start to connect those dots and learn intuitively about foods, and that's a win.
That's eating to win right there.
That's eating to win, yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, tell me this, because something that I learned, because here's a personal journey, and I've spoken about this before, I won't go too deep, but when I was really hardcore in the movement realm, I was doing a lot of CrossFit, calisthenics, that kind of thing, and then I got into movement, met Ido Portal, started training under him, opened the gym. All of a sudden my life became based around movement. Huge amount of training. Shit, I was doing jiu-jitsu at the same time. Huge physical output, mid-20s, so I can do whatever the fuck I want. Didn't eat any carbs, right? Because I was like following the paleo thing, and it was and I know that paleo is not necessarily low carbs, but that was how I was interpreting it, and it was like meat and high protein, high fat, some vegetables, but nothing that was no carbohydrates really. Very caffeinated over those years, fucking had to be. I started to get some influence that was like from the strength realm, that was like, man, sometimes the healthiest thing for you when you're training hard is to order a muffin with your coffee or to have some ice cream. Like sometimes that's just what your body, and I started to come around to this idea of, fuck, I probably need to just eat some shit sometimes. And I realized looking back, I was undernourished, right?
Yeah.
Kept me lean, but I was undernourished. So, and obviously seeking nourishment is not necessarily have a bowl of ice cream, but I could see the case for, dude, sometimes it's better for you just to get more calories in.
Yep.
What's an interesting sort of paradox though, is that's like in that context for that person who's been living that way, that's okay. But for someone who's like been consistently maybe under eating, or protein deficient, but they're overweight, maybe too much alcohol, like someone who you described, who grabs an iced coffee and a croissant on the way to work, and for that person, no, not a bowl of ice cream after dinner. Like you don't need more calories. Like we're talking about two different parties,
two different people.
Yeah, and so and is it kind of when you boil it down to that end of the discussion, is it kind of group A, group B, or are there more groups?
Oh, everything's individual, right? Because so the challenge is with athletes, or with people who train a lot, the challenge is how can we get enough nourishment in without eating really poor quality foods that can trigger autoimmune conditions or digestive issues. So yeah, you can have ice cream, but what if you have a problem with dairy, right? Or, so how do we get enough nourishment in? Because clean foods, quote unquote, like you need to eat a pretty high volume to get enough calories in, right? But when you look at things like hypothalamic amenorrhea, where female hormones just shut down, it's not just the overall calorie count that's low. Even if you just restrict one of the macronutrients and your calories stay the same, that can cause it also. So if you completely cut out carbs, even if you still have a normal calorie count, that will cause problems. So my rule is generally, if you live like me at the moment, my activities, I would say medium. Compared to what I used to do, it's not as high. So I don't eat as many carbs. Most of my carbs are at night. During the day, I tend to eat pretty much fat, protein, some fruit here and there, water and coffee. That's basically the diet. But if I was training in the morning and training again at night, and I would be eating pretty big breakfast, pretty big lunch, carbs with every meal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the answer is it depends on the individual, right? Which is not the answer everyone wants, but it really does. It depends.
Makes sense. But even in that way, it does depend.
The thing with guys like you and like people that do that, jump all in with things, you tend to go extreme. You tend to go, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm just going to do completely zero carbs, and that's just how I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You operate on the extremes of the spectrum.
It's true. I find it personally very interesting with food from that point of view, because I will do that for a period and be militant about it. And then I will soften. I'll go, okay, cool, that's cool, we've done that. And then I'll go, hey, let's, whatever, have a couple bits of toast at breakfast. And yeah, it's cool, pump a bit more rice and whatever. And then before you know it, I'm buying chocolate milk from the service station. You know what I mean? And it's like, sugar has just found its way back into my diet.
See, this is, some people can do the whole, if it fits your macros, calorie counting, eat whatever you want as long as you can have it within reason. Like some people can do that. I can't do that. I mean, I could. I don't do it very well. Me, I prefer to have just rules. It's ones and zeros. I'm like, I'm either doing it or I'm not.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like no bread, no pasta, zero. No cereal, absolutely zero.
Yeah.
So that I remove the decision-making process.
Yeah.
It's not even a choice anymore. And that's just how I prefer to do it. Some people are different. Some people can do I'll have a little bit and add it to my tracking app. And for me, I'm like, no.
It's just, it's an efficiency to your decision making.
When I want to lose weight, like when I feel like I've gotten a little bit too heavy and I want to lose some fat, I basically just go, I'm going to eat greens, meat, fruit, water, coffee, and that's it. And when I go grocery shopping, that's what I buy. And when I cook, that's what I cook. And it's efficient. It's easy. I don't have to count calories. That's just what I do.
Yeah.
I try to remove decision-making as much as clear mental bandwidth, because human error is the most common error. You'll definitely, if you have the choice, you can't rely on your discipline,
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a great point. We had Luke Tulloch, who's been on the show a couple of times. He's a bodybuilder who's studied neuroscience.
Yeah.
But he said the same thing. He said a lot of the time it just works easier to draw a line in the sand and go, I don't do that ever.
Yeah.
Or for this period of time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think back to that. I've taken a flexible sort of dieting approach, tracking macros and stuff to eating before, and for me it's really fucking boring. Like it's a shit fight. Whereas I think back to when I just didn't really eat carbs, that was simple. So being able to say, well, I don't eat these specific foods, no problem.
Yeah. And it all leads to the same thing. Like it's, yes, you cut calories and that's why you're losing weight.
Yeah.
But which system do you want to use? Which one works better for you, right? So for me, rules just work. I just don't do it. There's a lot of things like that in my life. I just don't do that. I'm trying to think of another example. I don't know. There's lots like drugs and whatever, right? I just
don't take drugs. Do drugs sometimes?
Occasionally, CBD oil.
Yep.
With THC. Otherwise, no.
Never
tried anything else.
Not even at the Jungle Brothers Christmas party.
I'd love to do mushrooms. That's something that I really want to do soon.
Yep.
My girlfriend and I want to do it together, actually.
Cool.
That's something I definitely want to get into. But otherwise, no. Doesn't appeal to me. I guess caffeine's a drug.
Yeah.
That appeals to me.
Yeah. You hear Michael Pollan talk about caffeine?
Not much, no. What does he say? I like Michael Pollan, actually.
He's great,
Very
huh?
good. Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never read any of his books, but they all look amazing. Cooked, the series on Netflix.
Yeah.
For anyone that's not familiar with Michael Pollan, there's a 3-part series or 4-part Cooked, which is amazing. I've watched it a couple of times. It's great. But I believe I heard him talking about his most recent book, or it could have been the one before that, on a podcast. And he was talking, he did one that was about the use of psychedelics.
How to Change Your Mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think he's done one since then, which was about caffeine and sugar and maybe something else. Mm-hmm. And I just remember hearing him talk about he went off caffeine for 6 months or whatever.
Yeah.
And then
that was on the Rogan podcast, yeah.
And then the morning where he went to the cafe for the first time when he sat there in the sun and he ordered a cappuccino or whatever. But the way he describes it, and he's like, it was like one of the most powerful of all the drugs.
Yeah.
In that moment, it like hit him where it's like, oh my God, like this is a full on experience I'm having. And I think he had to leave because he was like, this is getting a bit too intense.
Yeah.
But he was just speaking to the potency of caffeine, but the fact that most of us just dose with it so consistently.
I love it.
I mean, who doesn't?
I love coffee. But again, people... So actually when I was driving here, I was thinking of things that we would talk about. And like, that's one of the things where people latch onto the low-hanging fruit. So for example, they go, I'm going to cut coffee because that's how I'm going to get healthier. So no, you don't need to cut coffee. You need to fix all these other big things that you're doing. You can still have your coffee. Right? You don't need to give up everything you love, but maybe you can get more sleep. Maybe you don't have to kill yourself at the gym every day and then you don't have to rely on coffee so much. So people latch onto the low-hanging fruit. Another big one is organic versus non-organic food. You know, do I need to buy all organic? No, you don't have to. You can get really healthy eating non-organic. You don't have to buy grass-fed beef. Is it better? Yes. But if it's the decision between am I going to eat a healthier meal non-organic or just eat whatever I am because I can't have full organic, well, I would just choose a non-organic healthier meal. Yeah. Right? It's just humans have this thing. We have a fallacy. We think we do everything 100%. And I hear this all the time from people. They go, I'm either an all-in or all-out type of person. No, you're not. Nobody does anything 100%. In fact, it's better to do something 80% than at 0%. It's better to turn up to a gym 3 times a week than none at all.
JT would argue that.
What's JT's?
JT believes that you're lowering the bar by you're giving people an out.
Oh, am I?
Well, I don't.
Depends what they want.
I don't disagree with you, but I believe something is better than nothing. JT believes not. It reduces the standard. I say that because he hung out with do you know Raspberry Ape? No. Dan Strauss is a grappler from the UK.
Oh, Dan, yeah, I do, yeah.
Thick, does all the grip training.
Yeah.
JT went and hung out with him and they trained and podcasted together and whatever. And JT's like, bro, because I don't know if you know, but on the Bulletproof podcast, JT and I regularly disagree on things.
I saw some.
Yeah. And I like it. I'm the voice of reason. He's the extreme guy.
Yeah.
And and Raspberry Ape was like, blah, 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 something is better than nothing. And JT was like, no, it's not, Dan. And Dan's like, they had a disagreement. And Dan said to him after the show, he said, it's the first time anyone's disagreed with me on the podcast, which, it was great. It was amicable.
Yeah.
I think he enjoyed it. But I was like, fuck. Just interesting, right? Like, I do believe that.
Yeah.
Something is better than nothing. If it's whatever you can give me.
Yeah.
If it's 40%.
Yeah.
Not ideal, but it's better than 0.
Exactly, yeah. I remember when I was training at TriStar, George St. Pierre used to teach a class every Monday. And
you used to get to train with George?
Yeah, he's awesome, dude. He's amazing. And he said something that I'll never forget. We finished the class and he's like 40, George is 41, 42 years old and still in really good shape. The guy lean, fit, trains with everyone. He could fight now and
Still.
probably win, right? He's very, very like in very good shape. And he said, he's like, guys, you know, I'm 41, 42 and I'm still able to train and move and do all these things. And a lot of the guys that I started with aren't able to do that. And it's because of the way that I train. And he said in his like Quebecois accent, he was like, you know, it's better to do a little bit a lot than a lot a little bit. Better to turn up every day and do 40 minutes, an hour, every single day, a little bit a lot, than to turn up once a week and do 3-4 hours. And the other analogy I use is like brushing your teeth. You know, you brush your teeth for 3 minutes in the morning, 3 minutes at night, 6 minutes a day, multiply that by the month, works out to be like 180 minutes. Why don't you just do it once a month for 180 minutes?
Doesn't work like that,
does it? Like that. Neither does skill building, neither does health. You can't just eat. I mean, you know, you can't sleep 48 hours once a month or once a week. You have to sleep every night. And you have to move every day.
Is it the case that anything your physiology requires consistency? Is that if we, you know, because I've used the toothbrushing thing with
mobility.
Yeah, with mobility, but also discussing like people missing workouts, something like that. Hey, I didn't do this. I didn't do that. You know, I didn't get enough protein today.
Yeah.
You know, say, and it's like, it doesn't matter. Your physiology doesn't really recognize necessarily what you did or didn't do today. Your physiology recognizes what you do consistently all the time.
Yeah.
So if you don't brush your teeth tonight, you won't have bad dental health tomorrow.
Yeah.
But if you don't brush your teeth every night or every morning for the next 2 months, we got problems.
Yeah, it's a compounding effect.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think though, is that the case for most physiological?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah?
Pretty much, yeah. So what you want to do, because there will be times, like the whole mission statement of the business that we've built is...
What's the name of the business?
Humanly.
Humanly.
Yeah. So the idea behind the name is I've taken resilient and humans and I've just put it together in one word. Humanly, resilient humans. And the idea is like, yes, you're going to run into trouble. Yes, you're going to have a baby and you're going to be sleep deprived. Yes, you're going to have an injury and you're going to have surgery and you won't be able to exercise. Shit happens, right? But how resiliency is being able to bounce back from that shit from a physiological standpoint. Mm-hmm. And then metabolic reserve is the ability to withstand that long-term. How much reserve do you have to go through a long period of shit, right? Because everyone's like, you can't avoid the shit. Shit just comes at you. It's life.
Yeah.
You know, things happen and why not set yourself up from a physiological health standpoint to be as resilient as possible so that you can bounce back? That's the idea.
Metabolic reserve, I really like that as a way to a visualization. It's like, what stocks have you built here that are going to lay to endure some hard times?
Well, let's think about muscle mass. That's metabolic reserve for later in life. The more muscle you have, the more you can maintain, the less likely that you will fall and fracture your hip and have all these issues. So that's reserves. Same thing nutritionally, like your state of health, your blood work, your like overall, your vitamin D levels, your B12, your protein stores. These are all reserves for when you go through a period where you have to, for whatever reason, not be that healthy, whether you work more or you have a kid or whatever happens. So God forbid you get in an accident and you have to have a emergency surgery. If you're in a better state of health, less risk of something going wrong. Something as simple as that.
Yeah. We visualize, or our business is modeled very much on a similar quality. The word that we use is robustness and durability.
Yeah.
And kind of speaking to the same thing. And we're obviously, we do look at it from health, but we are obviously more interested in the physical. We believe that's, you know, largely the pathway often to the rest of it. But it's that same idea. It's like, are you developing health or a structure? That could be whatever you want. That is robust. It can handle some hard times. It can handle some rough play. You want to play jiu-jitsu, you want to jump out in the soccer pitch, You want to go to Papua New Guinea and do the Kokoda Trail this holidays. Like, are you tough enough for that? But then also, can you endure it? Like, are you durable, and can your joints handle this shit? You know?
Yeah. And that kind of, I guess I should rewind a bit and talk about the chronic stress, bring it back up, because I did paint a pretty bad picture of if you work and this and that. But you can withstand that stress. Like, it just needs to be a conscious decision, and you need to be in the state of health to be able to do it. So if you want to sprint for 12 months and make as much money as possible and do these things, that's fine. I want you to do that, because avoiding stress is avoiding life. Everything is stressful, even positive things like having a child or moving houses or starting a business. That's stressful.
Stress is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the original connotation, like the original definition of the word stress was not negative or positive. It really just...
stimulus.
It's a load, isn't it?
Yeah, it's stimulus. That's all it is.
But the way that we perceive it now is that stress is bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the idea is like you want stress. Otherwise, like Bubble Boy, right? You avoid the world, you avoid doing anything, you avoid achieving anything of significance. But just build a foundation first of health that can withstand that stress. I was listening to Islam Makhachev talk about his camp for Charles Oliveira, and he said the first month of camp always starts with weight training.
Ah, really?
Yeah. So he does a month of weight strength training, and then the next 2 months are all wrestling, sparring, jiu-jitsu, because he goes, I can't be weight training while I'm doing that stuff, because then that stuff isn't as efficient as effective because I'm exhausted. So the first month starts with building the strength foundation.
Wow. So
that he can then maintain the next 2 months of sparring and jiu-jitsu and whatever he's doing.
Ah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Foundation. Same thing with...
To your point about, that it's not like that picture you painted being dark. And I mean, sure, from that point of view it is. But I guess the other thing to say is like, if everything is a trade-off.
Yeah.
So if you are living in that, as you said, if you are living in that way,
yep, it's
fine. Like that is your choice. That is your free will as a human.
Yeah.
And maybe for some people it is not. It is something they have to do. Right? And that is just the case for a lot of people on this planet. They don't have the choice. It's just, this is what you got to do.
Yeah.
It's the opportunity that's present. Take it. Otherwise you won't survive. But to you can still approach that in an intentional manner. So I think say I know in the past I remember posting something on my Facebook years ago about some of the downsides of corporate clothing and particularly the footwear. There was a guy that used to train at the gym, older fella, who got really upset by it and came hard. And mate, you fucking shouldn't, there's people out there working hard. And I was like, whoa, yeah, I'm not saying, I'm just saying that your shoes are fucked. Don't come to me when you can't walk properly.
Yeah.
But so awareness is the first thing. Yeah. And if you can know, hey, okay, you might be stuck in this cycle and you might not have a choice to get out of it right now, but there are things that you can do, you can work on, that perhaps you can start to change in your life, or even just shift perspectives, and that will allow you to live better, live healthier, enjoy yourself more. And if you're fine just where you're at, then you can stay there too.
Yeah.
Right? It's all that side of it is a choice.
Yeah. Look, don't get me wrong. I do that too. My life isn't entirely healthy. There are days where I work a 14-hour day, and forget to eat. Happens.
Happened to me today.
Yeah. But I know I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I'll know the next day that I've done it, and I'll know why I feel shit, and I'll know why I didn't sleep well, and then I'll do some things to fix it. Right. So it's just being awareness, knowing why you're reacting and why you're feeling the way you're feeling, or why your health is not doing so well, and then having the skills or someone to help you kind of rebalance that. But yeah, no one's perfect. It's not to say that you should never do that. I'm driven. I want to build the biggest integrative health business on the planet if it's up to me, right? I want to serve people from all around the world who can't get access to things like this from Australia.
You're going to need it when you got 65 children.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Alhamdulillah. But it's yeah, we all have that, but it's just about making that conscious decision. And like, you know, I wasn't always there. I remember doing things and not understanding why I did them. I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, why am I working so hard? Or why am I fighting MMA? That was a big one. It's like, why am I doing this?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Like, why were you doing it?
Probably approval. Probably because that's what I identified as. And then I was like, if I stop, I'll let people down.
Yeah.
And then who am I?
The coach, the guys at the gym, that's who I am.
Yeah.
That's my status.
Yeah. That's probably why I did it. So understanding that and having the awareness to go like, oh, fuck, it's not a good reason to do it. It's not going to get me through the tough losses and the tough training camps. It's not a big enough why.
Yep.
Yeah.
Marko, I really enjoyed our chat today.
Me too, man. That was good. I feel like we could talk about it a lot.
Yeah, I think we should do it again.
We should.
Can you tell the folks where they can find your business and you know whatever you got to plug?
Yeah, so Marko's Daily Dose on Instagram. That's with a K. The website is humanlywellness.com, HUMANLI wellness.com. Facebook, Marko Papuckowski. There's only one. You'll find it.
Papuckowski. Does every Macedonian last name end in ski?
Like 90% of them, yeah.
Okay.
And then even more confusing, female would end in an A.
Oh.
It's like my sister's surname is Papuckowska.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. I never knew that.
It's male and female, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah, you guys can find us on those platforms. We have a newsletter as well that I write to every now and again. But, yeah, that's it.
Man, I think, I love that. Shining a bit of a light on just those key things. Maybe next time we can talk deeper on those 5 elements. I really like those 5 pillars that you mentioned.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll prepare some stuff. It'd be good.
Okay.
We'll get into the specifics.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Links to everything that Marko mentioned are in the show notes, so you can click through there, check out his work. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Helps to support the show, and it helps to get good conversations out there so more people can live better. Thank you, fam. We'll catch you next week.